there is a place on Earth where sunlight has never reached. It sits in the western Pacific, south of Guam, almost 11,000 meters below the surface. The deepest measured point is about 10,935 meters down. The water there pushes with the weight of roughly 8 tons on every square inch. The temperature stays between 1 and 4 degrees Celsius. If you drop Mount Everest into this trench, its peak would still sit more than 2 kilometers underwater. This is the Mariana Trench. Its lowest point, the Challenger Deep, is the bottom of the world. Nothing should survive here. No light, no warmth, almost no food. By every rule we know, it should be empty. But it is not empty. Today, we will try to unravel what lives at the bottom of the ocean and what we have already left down there beside them. The trench is shaped like a thin crescent, curved across the floor of the western Pacific. It runs for about 2,500 kilometers, roughly 1,200 miles, south and east of the island of Guam. At its southern tip lies the deepest part, the Challenger Deep. It is not one single hole. It is a set of 3 small basins sitting side by side, each more than 10,850 meters deep. The nearest land is Faze Island, about 287 kilometers to the southwest. Guam, the closest large island, sits around 304 kilometers to the northeast. To reach this place, you have to travel hundreds of kilometers from anything that breaks the surface. According to detailed sonar mapping carried out in 2020 from the research vessel Pressure Drop, the floor of these basins is not flat. It rolls in slopes and piles of rock, resting on a bed of pale sediment called pelagic ooze. That survey, published the following year, fixed the deepest sounding at about 10,935 meters, give or take 6 meters. And here is the strange part. After all that mapping, after every descent, scientists still cannot agree which of the 3 basins holds the single deepest point. The western and eastern pools both run past 10,920 meters. The numbers sit so close together that the title of deepest place on Earth keeps moving by a few meters between them. We have mapped the surface of Mars in finer detail than this. The lowest point on our own planet is still an argument. Pressure is the real guardian of this place. At the surface, the air around you presses at about 1 atmosphere. You never feel it because your body pushes back with the same force. Go down into water, and that pressure climbs fast. For every 10 meters you descend, it rises by roughly 1 more atmosphere. At the bottom of the Challenger Deep, the water above presses at around 1,086 bar. That is close to 1,071 times the pressure at sea level. On every square inch, it works out to about 8 tons of force. Picture the weight of a small truck pressing down on a coin. According to data gathered by the submersibles that have reached the floor, the pressure there passes 1,089 standard atmospheres, more than 16,000 pounds per square inch. Unprotected, a human body would not last a second. Air pockets collapse. Soft tissue gives way. This is why the craft that go down are built like armor. The hulls are thick spheres of titanium, shaped to spread that force evenly across every point. A flat window would shatter. A weak seam would fold inward in an instant. So consider what that means. Everything we send to the bottom has to fight the ocean for permission to be there, even for a few hours. And yet, things live here with no armor at all. Soft, thin-bodied creatures drift through that same crushing water as if it were nothing. How they hold their shape against a force that flattens steel is the first real mystery of the deep. It is hard to feel a number like 10,935 meters. So let us build it from something you know. Mount Everest stands 8,849 meters above sea level, the highest point on the planet. Take that entire mountain, every ridge and glacier, and lower it into the Challenger Deep. The summit, the place climbers risk their lives to reach, would vanish under more than 2 kilometers of black water. The lowest point of the ocean is over 2,000 meters farther from the sky than the top of the world rises above it. Now think about the journey down. In 1960, the first vessel to reach the bottom, a craft called the Trieste, took close to 5 hours just to sink, not to explore, to fall. 5 hours of slow drop through layer after layer of darkening water before anything touched the floor. According to the records of that dive, the two men spent only about 20 minutes at the bottom before they had to begin the long climb back up. The sediment they stirred clouded the water almost at once, and they could see very little. 5 hours down, 20 minutes there. That ratio tells you how hostile this place is to us. We can fall into it. We can barely stay. The ocean does not keep its visitors. It tolerates them, briefly, then pushes them back toward the light. Below them, in the dark, they were so eager to leave. Something was waiting that had never needed to leave at all. Sunlight does not give up easily, but it has limits. In clear ocean water, the last faint trace of it fades out somewhere around 1,000 meters down. Below that line lies a region scientists call the midnight zone. There is no day there, no dawn, no color. Past 6,000 meters, you enter the Hadal zone, named after Hades, the underworld of Greek myth. The Challenger Deep sits almost 5,000 meters below even that boundary. So the bottom of the trench has never seen the sun, not once in 60 million years. The only light that has ever touched that floor came from the lamps of a few machines, switched on for a handful of hours, then carried back up. The cold matches the dark. According to measurements taken at the bottom, the water there holds steady between 1 and 4 degrees Celsius, just above freezing. It never warms. It never shifts with the seasons because no season reaches it. Think about what that combination takes away. No light means no plants. No plants means no base for a food chain the way it works on land. Cold, this constant slows every living process to a crawl. By the logic of biology, this should be a desert. A flooded, freezing, lightless desert, sealed off from the energy of the sun that powers almost everything else alive on this planet. And yet animals are down there, hunting, breeding, growing old. The question is not only how they survive the cold and the pressure, it is what on earth they could possibly be eating. Before we ask what lives in this pit, it helps to ask how the pit got there. The trench was not carved by water. It was torn open by the planet itself. The Earth's crust is broken into vast plates that drift slowly across the surface. Here in the Western Pacific, the old and heavy Pacific plate is sliding beneath the smaller Mariana plate, bending downward and sinking back into the hot interior of the Earth. This process is called subduction. Where the plate folds under, the seafloor is dragged into a deep, narrow gash. That gash is the trench. According to geologists, this collision began around 50 to 60 million years ago, in the epoch known as the Eocene. It has been pulling the seafloor down ever since, at a pace measured in centimeters per year. The Mariana Trench is part of a larger pattern. It runs along the Ring of Fire, the chain of subduction zones and volcanoes that circles the Pacific Ocean. This is the most violent ring on the planet, the source of most of its largest earthquakes. The Mariana Trench is the deepest scar in it, so this is not a quiet hole. It is an open wound in the crust, slowly swallowing the floor of the ocean. The deepest place we know is also one of the most restless. And into that wound, year after year, something drifts down from above. That slow fall is the only reason anything down here is alive at all. With no sunlight to grow food, the bottom of the trench depends entirely on death from above. When a plant, an animal, or a single cell dies near the surface, its body begins to sink. On the way down, it breaks apart, mixes with waste and dust, and forms soft, pale flakes. Scientists call this marine snow. It drifts down slowly, endlessly, through the dark. In most of the ocean, plenty of it gets eaten before it ever reaches the floor. But the Challenger Deep is so deep that very little survives the trip. According to researchers studying the trench, a single flake of this organic matter can take weeks, sometimes months, to fall all the way to the bottom. So the food supply here is a thin, slow drizzle of the dead. There are no green pastures, there is no harvest. There is only what rots far above and happens to make it down without being eaten on the way. This shapes everything about life in the trench. Animals here cannot afford to be picky. They cannot afford to waste energy. Many are built to survive long stretches with nothing at all. then feed in a frenzy the moment something edible lands nearby. Drop a dead fish into the Challenger Deep, and within hours the bottom comes alive. Creatures appear out of the blackness, drawn from who knows how far, swarming the meal before anyone else can claim it. Hunger is the oldest law down here, and the animals that obey it best are the first to arrive, in numbers that should not be possible in a place this empty. The first to come are the amphipods. These are small crustaceans, distant relatives of shrimp and crabs, usually no longer than a few centimeters. In the sunlit ocean, they are easy to ignore. In the trench, they are the masters of the floor. When scientists lower a baited camera into the Challenger Deep, often using a chunk of mackerel to draw life in, amphipods are almost always the first animals to arrive. They come in swarms, sometimes hundreds at a time, crawling and twitching over the meal. The best known of them here is a species called Hirundellea gigas. For a deep-sea amphipod, gigas is large, reaching several centimeters in length, far bigger than its shallow water cousins. According to studies of these animals, they carry special enzymes in their guts that let them digest material almost nothing else can, including the tough fibers of sunken wood that drift down from the surface. They are built to wring a living out of scraps. But the strangest fact about them is simply how many there are. In a place with so little food, you would expect to find almost nothing. Instead, the floor of the deepest trench on Earth swarms with scavengers, waiting in the dark for the next body to fall. They are tough and patient, and they are everywhere. And they are not the top of this hidden world. Something hunts the amphipods. Something with eyes and a backbone. Something that, by every prediction scientists once made, should not be able to live at the bottom of the sea. That something is a fish, a small, pale, almost see-through fish called the Mariana snailfish. It looks nothing like the toothy monsters people picture, living in the deep. There are no fangs and no glowing lures. Instead, imagine a delicate tadpole, around 20 to 25 centimeters long, with a soft body, a large head, and a thin tail trailing behind it like a ribbon. Its skin is so clear that you can see its internal organs through it. It has no scales. Its bones are thin and partly soft. By the standards of the surface world, it looks fragile, almost unfinished, and yet it rules the deepest reaches of the trench, hunting the very amphipods that swarm the floor. In 2017, scientists from the Japanese agency JAMSTEC filmed a Mariana snailfish swimming at a depth of 8,178 meters. According to their report, that made it the deepest fish ever recorded on camera at the time. The footage shows a ghostly white shape gliding calmly through water that would crush a submarine window, completely at home. How does a soft, scaleless body survive 8 tons of pressure on every square inch? Part of the answer is that it has no air pockets to collapse. Its tissues are filled with fluid, which barely compresses, so the pressure pushes equally from every side, and the animal simply does not feel the squeeze the way we would. But there is a hidden boundary even the snailfish cannot cross. Go a little deeper, and the fish disappear completely. Somewhere down there is a line that no animal with a backbone has ever been seen below. And science thinks it knows why. For all the snailfish's talent at surviving pressure, it runs into a wall. Across every ocean trench studied so far, fish simply vanish somewhere between about 8,200 and 8,400 meters down. Below that depth, scientists have searched again and again. They find amphipods. They find other small invertebrates. But they have never confirmed a single fish. The deepest fish ever filmed was caught on camera in 2023, a type of snailfish swimming at 8,336 meters. It is worth being clear about one thing. That record was not set in the Mariana Trench. It came from the Izu Ogasawara Trench, off the coast of Japan, where slightly warmer water seems to let life push a little deeper. The record holder lives in a different trench entirely, yet the limit it reveals applies everywhere, the Challenger Deep included. So why can fish go no further? According to the leading explanation, the answer is chemistry. To survive the pressure, deep-sea fish flood their cells with a protective molecule that keeps their proteins from being crushed out of shape. The deeper they live, the more of it they need. But there is a point, around 8,200 meters, where they would need so much of it that their bodies could no longer balance the salt and water inside them. Past that line, the very trick that lets them survive the deep would begin to kill them. This means the bottom of the Mariana Trench, more than 2,000 meters deeper still, is a place no fish can reach. The lowest floor belongs to stranger things. One of them is not even an animal. Below the depth where fish give up, the trench floor is ruled by life that does not play by familiar rules. The strangest of all is the xenophyophore. From a distance, it looks like a lump of crumpled sediment, sometimes 10 centimeters across, sitting quietly on the bottom. It seems unremarkable. It is one of the most remarkable organisms alive. A xenophyophore is a single cell, one cell about the size of a human fist. Almost everything you can see with your bare eyes is built from billions or trillions of cells working together. This thing is just one, grown to a size that should not be possible, gathering grains of mud and the remains of other creatures to build itself a soft, branching shell. According to deep-sea biologists, xenophyophores are among the largest single-celled organisms known on Earth, and they do well in some of the deepest places we have ever looked. In the trenches, they are common. They give shelter to smaller animals, like tiny apartment blocks made from one living cell. They are not alone down there. The floor is also home to sea pigs, pale, plump relatives of the sea cucumber that walk across the mud on rows of tube-like legs. There are spoonworms that sit half-buried, sweeping the sediment for scraps. There are creatures that have barely been described, glimpsed once on camera and never seen again. Most of what we have found at these depths turned up in just the last few decades. And most of the trench has never been seen by human eyes at all. To grasp how little we know, it helps to remember how few of us have ever gone down to look. The story of how we found this place begins long before we could reach it. In the 1870s, a British sailing ship called HMS Challenger set out on a voyage around the world to study the oceans, the first expedition of its kind. The work was slow and physical. To measure depth, the crew lowered a weighted line, a length of hemp rope with iron weights tied to the end, and let it sink until it touched bottom, then hauled it back up by hand. In 1875, near Guam, they dropped a line that kept going far past anything they expected. According to the records of that voyage, they measured a depth of about 8,184 meters. It was the deepest sounding anyone had ever taken. Their equipment was rough, and the real depth turned out to be far greater, but they had found something without equal. A hole in the seafloor, deeper than any mountain on land, is tall. The spot was later named the Challenger Deep, after the ship that first touched its edge with a piece of rope. For the next 75 years, almost nothing happened. Knowing a place is there and reaching it are very different problems. A hemp line could measure the deep. It could not carry a person into it and bring them back alive. That would take a machine strong enough to survive the crush, and a crew brave or reckless enough to ride it down. It would take until 1960, and when humans finally reached the bottom, the number of people who would ever follow them stayed astonishingly small. On January 23, 1960, two men climbed into a strange vessel called the Trieste and began the long fall into the Challenger Deep. They were the Swiss engineer Jacques Picard and the United States Navy officer Don Walsh. After almost 5 hours of descent, they reached the bottom, the first human beings ever to do so. They stayed about 20 minutes, the floor lost in the cloud of silt they had stirred up, then rose back toward the surface. Then, for more than 50 years, no one returned. The deepest place on Earth was left alone. In 2012, the film director James Cameron made a solo dive to the bottom in a craft he had helped design, the Deep Sea Challenger, the first person to reach the Challenger Deep alone. In 2019, the explorer Victor Vescovo descended in a submersible called the Limiting Factor and went on to dive the deepest point several times as part of a wider mission to reach the floor of all 5 oceans. Even now, the number of people who have touched the bottom of the Challenger Deep is tiny. Fewer than 3 dozen human beings have ever been down there. Compare that to Mount Everest, More than 5,000 people have stood on the highest point on Earth. Far more have reached the top of the world than have ever seen the bottom of it. We know more about the floor of the trench than we once did. But knowing is not the same as standing there. And it was one of those rare visitors who, at the very bottom of the world, found something that did not belong. What Victor Vescovo saw on the seafloor, almost 11,000 meters down, was not a new species. By his account, it was something that looked like a plastic bag and a few sweet wrappers. He later said it was hard to be sure without bringing it up to study. But he was not the first to notice it. Back in 1998, a Japanese robotic submersible called Kaiko was surveying the trench when its camera caught something pale near the bottom. It was a single-use plastic bag, resting at a depth of about 10,898 meters. According to a 2018 study that searched through decades of deep-sea footage, that bag remains the deepest piece of plastic ever recorded anywhere on Earth. It gets worse than one bag. In 2019, researchers published a study in which they examined the guts of tiny amphipods pulled from 6 deep ocean trenches. According to that study, 72% of the animals had swallowed at least one piece of plastic. In the Mariana Trench, the deepest of them all, the figure was not 72%. It was every single one. 100% of the amphipods they tested had plastic inside their bodies. Most of that plastic, around 89% of it by one count, was single-use. Bags, bottles, wrappers, the kind of thing used for a few minutes at the surface, then thrown away and forgotten. So here is where the journey ends. We have sent fewer than 3 dozen people to the bottom of the ocean. But our garbage got there first. It reached deeper, and it now sits inside the bodies of creatures we are only beginning to name. The most untouched place on Earth was already touched by us. We have walked on the moon. We have sent machines past the edge of the solar system, billions of kilometers from home. Yet we have explored only a tiny fraction of our own ocean floor. We have mapped the surface of the moon and the surface of Mars in finer detail than the bottom of our own seas. The deepest place on Earth is still, in almost every way that matters, unknown to us. It is dark and cold and crushing. It is full of life we cannot fully explain, life that needs no sunlight and fears no pressure. And it is quietly marked, all the way down, by the things we threw away without thinking. We have only just begun to look. Who knows what we will find the next time we go down? Thank you for watching. Take care of yourself and discover the world. It holds many secrets.